Antenna's CEO shares insights on the firm's latest SVOD research, including churn stabilization, resubscribers, growth in ad-supported plans, the role of live, and more. Listen on.
Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Stream. This is Will Richmond from Video News, and that was Colin Dixon there at the beginning. Hey Colin, how is everything today?
It's great, thank you, Will, and I'm really excited today because we do finally have Jonathan Carson with us, right?
Yeah, indeed, from Jonathan Carson from Antenna, joining us on a once per quarter basis. He's going to talk about Antenna's latest report. We're going to get into some fine detail about how the streaming business is doing these days. But before we do that, we have a couple of quick news items, and you are going to get us started.
I am, and I just love Ted Sarandis when he gets out in the wild, Will. He just loves to talk. And this week, he was trying to encourage creators to come to YouTube. He was in New York at the Paley Center for Media, and he painted Netflix as a safer bet for YouTube creators to make money. What he said was, YouTube doesn't give them any money up front to make it, and by it he means their content. Quote, so they're doing it all at their own risk. And he sort of likened YouTube as a sort of pro-am service that he was using to scout for interesting, compelling program to watch, and I guess to steal away the best of it for Netflix, or at least steal away the best creators for Netflix. And this is something that Netflix has mentioned several times, that they sort of consider YouTube as a sort of training ground for transferring some of those guys to premium. And Will, I gotta tell you, I think this just reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of the way creators work. Creators are really focused on their audience. It's a two-way conversation, and I don't think they'll take the money if they can do it and continue to manage their channel and be successful on YouTube. But putting all their eggs in a Netflix basket, I think, will be a disaster for most creators. And I just can't see them doing it. I mean, their audience isn't there. Their audience is on YouTube. That's pretty clear that Netflix is kind of struggling with younger people. That's why they're doing a game service. So there was some data from Deloitte that showed that 50% of Generation Zs would be willing to watch TV shows and movies if they starred their favorite online creator. So there's clearly a benefit to Netflix if those creators come over. I just don't see a big benefit to the creators.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think back on your point about not putting all a YouTube creator not putting all their eggs in the Netflix basket, I would say that that's probably an unlikely scenario, just given, as you said, the size of their existing audiences. It sounds like a Netflix relationship would be more of an augment than a replacement. It's interesting. I'm kind of wondering how much overlap there actually is between YouTube creators and not just Netflix, but the SVOD landscape overall. I wasn't sure. I've sort of lost track of this a little bit. The idea that YouTube would be a potential training ground for SVOD services, that's a idea that's goes back for quite a while. I tried to Google the question, just, what the overlap is between creators and SVOD, and it wasn't apparent. I couldn't find an answer that readily. So I do wonder what that overlap actually is.
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty heavy. I mean, most Gen Zs are watching some TV, but that's not why they trust and watch creators. And I just think it's just fundamentally a misunderstanding of the relationship that creators have created with their audience. And look, YouTube is beating Netflix pretty handily in viewing time with those creators. I just don't see that those creators need Netflix. It's Netflix that needs them. But anyway, what did you see?
Well, Amazon was on my radar this week. Some of our listeners may have seen that they announced that they're planning to release at least 14 movies, maybe 14 to 16 in wide releases also. And that's a big shift in their movie strategy from over the past several years, where they've been really just releasing 5 to 8, and they would typically have a short release window in theater and then move over to the Prime service. So now what they're talking about is 14 to 16 movies for wide release in kind of a conventional release strategy. So that would represent, a big shift, a big investment by Amazon. I am not sure that I understand this move. We'll talk about it a little bit. Certainly to the extent that Amazon, wide release strategy, all A-list talent, by the way, also, then drive usage of the viewership of the movies on the Prime service. I think I can get that point. I'm not sure that at the box office they're going to be any more successful than other movies. And I believe that attendance is actually still below pre-pandemic levels in theater right now. So they'd be kind of going into some headwinds still existing there in theaters. So not sure I totally get it. How about you?
Yeah, you are dead right there, Will. I mean, the theaters are still well down. They're down 8% on what they were this time last year. Last year was down considerably from 2023 as well. I think ticket receipts were down 4% from 2023 in 2024, and they're still way below where they were in 2019. Receipts in 2019 were 11.4 billion in the US, and last year they were 8.6 billion, or rather that was in 2023. So the movie theaters have not come back at all. And by the way, I mentioned Ted Sarandos. We talked about him. He was twisting the knife in the movie business. As you know, he's been no fan of theaters. And he was just contrasting how the theaters have done. He said nearly every live thing has come back screaming. Broadway's back, breaking records right now. Sporting events, concerts, all those things that we couldn't do during COVID are back and bigger than ever, except theaters. So he was twisting the knife.
Yeah, don't tell Amazon that, right?
No. But I wonder if Amazon is going to agree with Adam Aron, who's CEO of AMC Theaters, was asking for a return to 60-day windows. And Cinema United President CEO Michael O'Leary was demanding that movies play exclusively in theaters for a minimum of 45 days. I wonder if they're going to agree to those extended windows, going back to that sort of windowing strategy, Will.
I don't know. We'll find out as the releases ramp up, but I don't know if Amazon can single-handedly reverse what's happened in theatrical, as you said.
Yeah, I think it'll take more than Amazon, and it's a pretty complicated picture that's really causing the decline of the theaters in general, I think, Will. So I don't know. But you know what? Maybe it's time for us to get to our interview with Jonathan.
Absolutely. Let's bring in Jonathan Carson from Antenna.
And I'm delighted to welcome Jonathan Carson, who's co-founder and CEO of Antenna Research. Jonathan, welcome to the podcast again.
Really happy to be back. Thanks, Colin.
Welcome, Jonathan.
Hey, Will. Great to be here.
Now, just to get you warmed up a little bit, remind our audience, tell them how Antenna gets the data that we're going to discuss this morning.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Colin. So Antenna is a data and analytics company focused on the subscription economy, and with a particular focus and love for the video streaming space. We have a panel of about 2 million Americans for whom we analyze financial transaction data. So this is data from credit card statements, digital receipts, and the like. It's all opt-in, and we take that very messy data, model it, cleanse it, and project it out to the population to do the type of insights that we'll be talking about today.
Very good.
Excellent. Well, let's go ahead and get started, Jonathan. Today we're going to be talking about Antenna's most recent report, which is the State of Subscriptions report for premium SVOD in 2024. And let's just get started at a high level. The report notes that premium SVOD subscribers were up 10.4% in 2024. And so how does this compare to prior years for both gross subscriber additions and net subscriber additions? And what are some of the key drivers?
Yeah, so Will, I think we're at a really interesting moment in the trajectory of the streaming category. As you said, growth or total subscribers for the largest services was up about 10% this year. That's down a little bit from the last couple of years. We were up 13% in 23, up about 14% in 22. And then obviously during the pandemic boom, we were up as high as the mid to high 20s in the height of the so-called streaming wars. Important to note, though, I think there's a really important development that kind of lies underneath of those numbers. We have all heard over the past, call it year and a half, a shift in the tone of communications from the streamers as they've moved away from talking about just driving pure subscriber growth and started to focus much more on driving profitable growth. The way that they have been trying to do that sounded a little bit crazy when you first heard the headlines. The strategy was, okay, we're going to raise prices while we lower our spend on marketing and programming, and we're going to lower churn while we do that. And while all that's happening, we're still going to grow double digits. So that sounds kind of impossible, and I think most industry analysts said you don't get to do all those things at the same time, that they work against each other. But in actuality, what we've seen is, okay, they are maintaining double-digit growth. They have made the cuts in spending. They have successfully raised the prices. And as we'll talk about in a second here, churn is starting to settle down. So it turns out consumers truly love these services. And even as the services are maybe, pulling back on some of the value propositions or toning down on some of the more aggressive efforts that they took with pricing and packaging in while they were in big acquisition mode, consumers are still sticking with them. And I would consider, when you put all that together, 2024 to be both a turning point and a very successful execution for the category.
I think I was one of those analysts who said you don't get to do all of those things together. So I guess they've proved me wrong. But
we all were, Colin. I think we are.
But maybe they don't get to do it forever. But let's talk about some of the details. Give us some of the who the gainers and losers are, and who's stable. What are some of the broader two or three trends for the particular services?
Yeah, so actually that's another interesting development in the market. We saw, between 2019 with the launch of Disney Plus and, call it through maybe 2023 or 2022, we saw these enormous changes in market share. So the share of total subscribers that these various services had. So we saw, the quick rise of Disney Plus at the expense of Hulu and Netflix, which were the dominant services at the time. And then over the next couple of years, regularly rising shares for Peacock, for Apple TV Plus, for Paramount, for the relaunched Max. That has settled in. And for the last 2 years, we've seen mostly stability in market share for total subscribers for all these services. Small share gains for Peacock and Paramount. So Peacock went from 9% to 11% share of subscriptions, Paramount from 12% to 14% over the last 2 years. But really, the story is stability in market share after a lot of years of several years of these really significant fluctuations.
And part of that stability, Jonathan, is that, as the report notes, churn in the final 3 months of 2024 decreased. And that was a nice reversal from prior months. Can you kind of put that in context, that churn stability, and what you think is behind it?
Yeah. So when I laid out that sort of triple Lindy that the industry was going for up front, clearly the industry, these players can raise their price and they can cut their marketing and programming spend. That's within their control, but you wouldn't assume that they could do all those things while also reducing churn. So I think churn has been the big story. Now churn has been on the rise over the past couple of years. So at the beginning of 2022, category churn on average was about 4% per month. By beginning of 2024, that was almost 6%. So really significant increase over those couple of years. The big story really started in Q4 of 2024. So almost every month for the past several years, almost every month, if you look at churn for that month and compare it to the same month the year prior, with almost zero exceptions, it was up year over year for the same month. In October of 2024, it was lower, just a little bit, but it was lower than October of 2023. November, lower than November of 23. Same in December that we reported. And I will tell you, we haven't reported our Q1 numbers yet, but January and February also down year over year. So that is 5 straight months that churn has been down year over year. Now, it's not at the level, we're still above 5%. It's not the levels that we used to be a couple of years ago, but the downward trend year over year, I think is a really big deal. And I think it kind of shows that, the last couple of times we've gotten together, we've been talking about all the subscriber management techniques that these services are starting to deploy. I think it shows that they're working. There are executional moves that the companies can make in the way that they run retention marketing, which are effective and which seem to be taking hold.
The churn picture is very complex. It's not, we seem to think of it in one dimension. And I think we should explore it. There's a couple of dimensions that we should look at. We should look at volatility and resubscribers. First, let's look at volatility, because volatility is up pretty sharply, particularly if you look back 2 years, right?
Yeah. So volatility, the way we think about volatility is kind of the mechanics of how net ads work, right? So you count the total number of gross ads, how many people sign up for the service in a year, but then, subtract out the total number of cancels, how many people cancel over the year. And then the result of that is your net ads. And the big story that was happening for several years was lots of new gross ads. The gross ads were dramatically increasing every year, but the number of cancels was increasing even faster. And so that's what created this kind of non-sustainable dynamic that caused the shift to profitability, because you're spending more and more money to drive those acquisitions, and meanwhile spending more and more money dealing with all these increasing cancels while you were having less growth, less net ads. So that was the really bad cycle. The good news is in 2024, while it didn't reverse, it slowed down. So we saw about 150 million total cancels across the 9 what we call premium streaming services in 2024, and that was up about 15% year over year. But the prior year in 2023, the cancels grew from 98 million to 128 million, so up like 32%. So the growth rate of the cancellations slowed down. Now, obviously, would you like to see cancels declining? Yeah, that'd be nice. But a slowdown from 32% to 16% is pretty significant.
And so related to that point, Jonathan, and I think you just noted it quickly there, but let's explore it further. I thought really one of the most interesting parts of the report was about so-called resubscribers, people who dropped a particular service, and then returned to it 6 or 12 months later. And it seems like that phenomenon has had a pretty big impact on churn.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of different ways to look at this. For one thing, those 150 million, or I guess last year was 175 million gross ads across the services. About a third of those were people that were coming back to the service within 12 months, right? So that is an enormous number of an enormous part of the overall acquisition strategy is getting people back. It's about a third of all of the acquisition. And then the other way to cut this is if you think of people who cancel a service, about a third of them within 6 months, about a third of the people that cancel a service within 6 months come back to it. And it's approaching half of the cancellations come back to it within a year. So, I think this is a good news, bad news for the industry. Clearly, consumers have learned it's very easy to go into my account dashboard, hit the cancel button, a lot easier than it used to be to cancel my pay TV service, where I had to, go into my local Comcast office and deliver hardware back to them. So it's very easy to cancel. But the good news is that more and more a cancel is not a cancel. It's really a pause. And so if you think of it in terms of how many months of revenue am I going to get from each subscriber? Well, maybe I'm not going to, for a good portion of my subscribers, I'm not going to get 12 months a year, but I'm going to get some months out of them. Even if I lose them, I'll probably get them back sometime in the future.
Yeah, that's the thing that really, when you take all of the churn data, the resubscribe data, and the volatility data, it really does sound like people are more actively managing their subscriptions than they were before. There's very much a situation where they want to pick up a new one, so they'll drop another one, and then they'll come back to that one later when they've got something interesting. So that's something that really did seem to come over to me pretty strongly in the data.
Yeah, I think that's right. Consumers they're still settling into these new habits, but we're starting to see these consumer patterns emerge.
Yeah.
I know it's only just a little bit of conjecture, would probably be just a bit of conjecture on your part, Jonathan, but do you think that what's happening underneath this is that people are, sort of watching the favorite shows they have on a particular service, and then once they've done that, they pause until kind of the following season of that favorite show comes back into the service? Is that the dynamic, do you think, or something else going on? Or
yeah, that show-based dynamic is a really important part of it. Now, I think for most households, it's more complex than that. They might have one or two services that they view as a utility, and they see as always on. For a lot of households, that's obviously Netflix, which leads to Netflix having the best churn rates in the industry. And I think Netflix has done a really good job of creating a customer experience that lends to that type of idea. Part of it is the size of the catalog, but part of it is the user experience as well. You go into Netflix and, they've kind of trained their users to go in the product without a particular show in mind. You have a good experience when you go into Netflix with them personalizing shows that are, prompting ideas for you. That type of user experience is going to drive a more loyal, more always on, more utility based type of behavior. But then, a household might have another set of secondary services that they cycle through and more actively manage depending on, whatever show they happen to be focused on at that time.
Interesting trend. One of the newer tiers that we have to choose from is the ad-supported plans. A couple of years old in most of the services out there, but they seem to be gathering strength, right?
Yeah, big time. It's a huge part of the story. I think it is a big part of that consumer behavior as well, because the ad plans are so much cheaper. And so they enable consumers to do some experimentation, to carry more services than they otherwise would be able to afford in their budget. And so what we see is, ad tiers are a really big part of the growth story for the category. So it is now amongst the 7 services that offer ad tiers in our top 9, Stars and Apple TV Plus are still only ad free. But of the 7 services that offer the ad tiers, 45% of subs are ad supported, and 57% of gross ads, so new people signing up, are choosing the ad tier. And that is a big deal considering just, 2 years ago in the industry, we really didn't know if advertising was even going to work in streaming. The thing that I think is most profound, though, is every single service. If you look at gross ads for 2024 compared to 2023, all 7 of the services that offer ad plans saw increases. And that is from the bottom end. So Netflix, only 27% of people in 2023 signing up for Netflix chose the ad tier. That rose to 41%, but it's at the top end too. So Peacock was already 74% ad plans in 2023. That increased to 78% in 24.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like the ad plans have played a huge role in the industry's ongoing growth.
A lot of our friends in the advertising industry are breathing a sigh of relief.
I remember a couple of years ago, Will, we were. Well, maybe it was more like 3 years ago, we were wondering if people would be accessible at all during prime time because of SVOD growth, but that certainly seems to have turned around. So let's switch topics a little bit and talk a little bit about the role of third parties in helping sell. Amazon continues to be a powerhouse, right, in reselling other services.
Yeah, it is. And I think this actually factors into some of that dynamic that you're talking about before, Colin, about new service trial, about, service pausing behavior. If you look at the Amazon user experience as opposed to what we just talked about with Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, when you go into that app, it's a very different situation. It is it's a very show-oriented experience, and Amazon does a great job in that environment of promoting its own shows that are tied to the Amazon Prime Video subscription service, its own shows that are free, the free ad-supported show tiers, its rental propositions, its rental movies and shows, and then the shows of the subscription services that Amazon carries through its channels format. And because of that, they are the services that distribute through Amazon channels, the third-party services that distribute through Amazon channels are able to draft off of that user experience environment and introduce themselves to new audiences, and oftentimes audiences that they have a hard time reaching directly. And I think there's 2 really interesting case studies that we highlighted in our report this quarter. One is Stars, and I think Stars presents great evidence for this. If you look at Stars penetration, all the people in the streaming universe that have ever tried Stars, it's 10%. 10% of people that are streaming subscribers have ever tried Stars. If you look specifically at people who are in the Amazon channels ecosystem, the people who do their subscriptions through Amazon channels, 40% of them have tried stars.
Wow.
Massive, massive difference in generating interest or generating trial for the Stars brand. Our other examples, more recent, Apple TV Plus just launched in, I guess, Q4 of last year on Amazon channels. Kind of a big deal. I think people always thought that Apple TV Plus would be, focused on the Apple ecosystem. So big deal that it went into Amazon channels. Well, what do we see? In a normal month, over half of people signing up for Apple TV Plus are people who had Apple TV Plus before and canceled it. So they're recycling a lot of those pausers in their signups. In the first 3 months on Amazon channels, 3 out of 4 people signing up for Apple TV Plus had never subscribed to the service before. So they're introducing it to a lot of new individuals. So, there's lots of concerns that services have about distributing through third parties, but I think it's pretty clear that the upside is you're introducing the service to new audiences that you probably wouldn't be able to reach on your own.
Yeah, it's almost no risk of cannibalizing your existing subscribers, right? You're seeing almost no evidence of that.
We're doing some work on that topic specifically, so keep an eye out on that, Colin. We think there's a way to actually quantify that upside in cannibalization.
Yeah.
But certainly when you look at the headline numbers, it seems pretty clear that third-party distributors like Amazon, as well as Roku, and now YouTube is playing in that space as well, are introducing new audiences to these services.
Yep.
Yeah, it certainly shows just the massive scale that Amazon has, how many people are coming through the service and coming through Prime each and every day.
They know how to sell stuff.
So we've heard. So let's go ahead and change topics again just a little bit, Jonathan, as we start to wrap up. So bundling, new data in the report indicates that the Disney Max bundle seems to be particularly effective, especially with for Max, which is getting north of 20% of its new subscribers from the Disney Max bundle. Retention also seems to be strong in the bundle. Can you share some thoughts on why the Disney Max bundle seems to be performing so well, and maybe broader thoughts on bundling in general?
Yeah, so I think if we're talking about all the factors that are driving the churn or the pausing behavior, a major potential antidote is bundling, and I think the reason it can work from a consumer behavior standpoint is if you think about maybe one of the services for most households being kind of an anchor service that they would have subscribed to anyway. You're potentially getting more people to the other services because you're lowering the price point relative to what they're already going to pay for that anchor service. But you're also kind of strengthening the ties for all parties because if I'm a diehard Disney Plus subscriber and now I'm picking up Hulu and Max on top of it, canceling Hulu and Max suddenly means I'm also canceling Disney Plus. And sure, I can then go back and subscribe directly to Disney Plus, but it's kind of adding some friction on that decision and giving maybe the strength of tie that I already had to Disney Plus, extending that on to the other services. I think that the unique thing about this proposition is that Disney and Max put together is that they really backed it with marketing muscle. The challenge I think that bundles have had thus far is these intercompany bundles are kind of tricky to negotiate. You have to agree on the economic terms, not always easy to do. But then even once they're signed, there's not a lot of motivation to promote them because especially in a world of decreasing marketing budgets, you probably want to put your limited resources towards the direct plan where you can have the whole spotlight to yourself. In this case, Disney and Max did really put promotional muscle behind it. We see it did respond. And, you know, the exciting thing for the industry is the retention numbers were so strong, over 80% 2-month retention, which is higher than Netflix 2-month retention, higher than the Disney bundle 2-month retention, and the 2-month retention for Hulu, for Disney Plus, and for Max as standalone services, more like 55%. So dramatically better retention than they get on their own.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're giving up some money up front to be in the bundle, but you make it up later because people stick around longer. You get better customer lifetime value.
Yeah, exactly. And it only works if you're strengthening ties with people that would have been weaker. If you're just bundling with a service where you already have a lot of overlap of very loyal customers, then you're probably just giving away some of the money. I think the Max, Hulu, Disney Plus combination was finding a lot of those what we call curious customers, the weaker tie, higher churn customers who are interested in the service but are probably not going to commit to long-term loyalty. It was winning those over, and then driving higher loyalty amongst them.
Yep. Well, I guess last up here we have live events. Seem to be a very effective way of getting new subscribers, and they don't just drop off after they've watched your live event, do they?
Yeah, so the retention on those big live event moments is what I'd say, probably lower than industry norms, but better than you might expect. So the services have been doing a good job after they sign up people with these big tentpole moments of showing them other things that will keep them around. I think the obviously the big story at the end of 2024 was Netflix getting into that game with the Paul Tyson fight, and then with Christmas NFL games. The story, I think, in 2025 is certainly seems to be indications that Netflix is going to keep down that path. But beyond that, the big thing that's going to happen in 2025 is we're talking about ESPN flagship launching. We're talking about a Fox streaming service launching, and we're talking about potentially now a CNN streaming service launching. And so together, I would say those kind of represent the last of the exclusive on linear television. Big programming blocks will now be available to cord cutters. And that is a really big deal. That means, those kind of remaining tentpoles that kept people tethered to a pay TV subscription or a virtual MVPD are coming loose. Now, that doesn't mean everybody's going to cancel their pay TV subscription, but the people that were hanging on to it specifically because those mostly live event programming were only available if you had the monthly TV package. That's not going to be the case anymore. And so I think we will probably see, I believe we will, likely see another big chunk of cord cutting taking place. And that's important to this streaming category because you still got 60 million households in the US paying whatever, 70 to 100 or even more per month for pay television. That's, 75 billion of spend a year, twice Netflix's global revenue that's still caught up in that product. And I think there's going to be a lot of reason that because of live events, a lot of reason that more of it could shake loose this year.
Yeah, and ESPN flagship is, the linchpin probably of what you just described. And we don't have pricing yet on ESPN flagship. So we don't know exactly how well that service is going to be received and whether sports fans think it's better to stay with their pay TV subscriptions.
TBD.
The other area you touched on with CNN is news, and I think we're going to see more movement with live news online. I'm betting Netflix is going to get into this game. I think there is no taboo with Netflix anymore, so I think they might be looking at that space as well. But Jonathan, this has been a fantastic review. Just tell people where they can grab the free report and sign up for the more detailed one.
Yeah, so our website has all of these reports available for download. It is antenna.live, antenna.live. And it's a brand new, refreshed website. So go check it out.
And it's looking good.
And if you're not getting that report, so that data, then you're really behind, because that covers so much data. We've talked a lot about it this morning. So we'll be trying to get Jonathan to come back and see us again next quarter when he's got more data.
I'll be here. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Jonathan. We appreciate you coming on again.
Okay. Thanks, Will. Thanks, Colin.
Inside the Stream is a production of In-Screen Media and Video News. All rights reserved.